Good morning. Welcome back to the Junius Maltby channel. Quick run through the headlines. Got a lot to talk about this morning. Updates regarding the Eurozone and potential Euro collapse. We did a video on that just recently. We discussed Germany moving its gold and some things that we were starting to see throughout the news. Some people didn't take too well to the news, and they are in almost a state of denial regarding the health and status of the euro. And those are the people that will be caught the most off guard, as they are completely ill-prepared for what could be coming to their neighborhood. So here we see some headlines, and recently it looks like Greenspan has come out of the woodwork. We've discussed some of his recent statements and quotations, but here we go. Euro to collapse, people rush to buy gold. Article number one we're going to talk about, Greenspan, quote, grave concerns for future of the euro. Alan Greenspan believes the euro will collapse and the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi, should come clean on the state of the Eurozone economy. The former chair of the U.S. Federal Reserve says it's only a matter of time before the euro collapses. Quote, Northern Europe has in effect been funding the deficits of the South that cannot continue indefinitely. The Eurozone is not working, unquote, says Greenspan. The call comes at a time Greece is suffering yet another debt crisis. Italy is also having to bail out its banks, wiping out the savings of many Italian investors. Deutsche Bank has issues, and Brexit may cause further economic consternation. And there are notable counter-establishment political movements on the rise, with fears that the Brexit vote has opened the door for other anti-EU votes. But for Greenspan, quote, Brexit is not the end of the set of problems which I always thought were going to start with the euro, because the euro is a very serious problem, unquote. Some have suggested the former central banker would do well to look at his own backyard. While we agree with many of Greenspan's comments and views, we wonder how concerned he is about the mountain of U.S. debt which exists and which is likely to grow under the Trump administration, says John Mayer at SP Angel, a brokerage based in London. But Greenspan counters, quote, the European Central Bank has greater problems than the Federal Reserve. Quote, the asset side of the ECB's balance sheet is larger than ever before, having grown steadily since Mario Draghi said he would do whatever it took to preserve the euro, unquote, says Greenspan. Quote, and I have grave concerns about the future of the euro itself, unquote. Further discussion on this article, they bring up the U.S. Federal Reserve and the issues here, the U.S. debt, definitely something to be concerned about. But what you're seeing here is friction, competition, he said, she said type behavior. Obviously, if we're reading about this in articles, I am sure that behind closed doors, the competition, the discussions, and the blame game is going to become much more severe and perhaps boil over at fever pitch. The currency wars, the trade wars, these economic wars have merely just begun. We're seeing the incipient stage of major economic upheaval internationally here. Gold, the ultimate insurance policy, as grave concerns about euro. Couple highlights from Mark O'Byrne's article. We've got, quote, the Eurozone isn't working, warns Greenspan. I view gold as the primary global currency, said Greenspan. Significant increases in inflation will ultimately increase the price of gold. Investment in gold now is insurance. This article also draws from the recent interview. You'll see some repeated quotations and statements from Alan Greenspan, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, from 1987 to 2006, deemed the collapse of the euro area inevitable if nothing changes. Expressing his grave concerns about the future of the European common currency, Greenspan told Gold Investor magazine that the eurozone is not working since the European Central Bank's balance has become larger than ever without growth propelling effect on the economies of euro area's member countries. Seeing the Brexit as just a start of a decomposition process for Europe, it's only a matter of time before the euro area collapses, Greenspan explained. Here's another headline, Euro to collapse, people rush to buy gold as trust in single currency disappears. The former head of the U.S. Federal Reserve has warned the euro is on the verge of collapse, saying he has grave concerns about his future. Again, repeating the quotes from a recent Greenspan interview. As all of this is happening, we also are seeing and hearing more talk about inflation here in the United States, especially inflation spiking. We discussed this. We talked about it last video. Let's touch on it again. We're seeing an increase in the consumer price index, one of the highest jumps for a month in a very long time. Over the course of time, this is just a refresher chart. We've seen this before, but you can see the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar over time since the Fed was created. And there it is from 1913 to 2013. Complete breakdown in the U.S. dollar's purchasing strength here. Consumer inflation, official versus the shadow stats. Here you go. There's always a discrepancy there if you're familiar with shadow stats. It looks like the official consumer price index is suppressed in what they release and how much they're willing to reveal as far as inflation pressures. Shadow stats most likely showing us a more accurate reflection of what's truly going on with the CPI and year-on-year inflation. Obviously, with inflation comes an increase in gold price, just the way it works. Gold investment is now insurance for long-term protection against inflation. So if inflation's happening, we're seeing it discussed. It's making its way into headlines. It's making its way into financial stories. And obviously, that's going to put pressure on gold. It's going to increase the amount of interest in purchasing in gold. And I think we are seeing that. And that's why we saw recent price increases in demand for gold. So U.S. inflation zooms to a 5-year high. Gold price appreciates on negative treasury yield. Here's a chart showing that. You can see the treasury and the gold price both taking off in opposite directions there. This article also brought up an interesting story regarding the future, the size and scope of other nations' economies going into coming decades. And here we see that China and India should become the world's #1 and #2 largest economies by 2050, based on purchasing power parity. China, of course, is already the largest economy by that measure. However, they see the Asian giant surpassing the U.S. economy on an absolute basis by as early as 2030. So here's the top 10 economies expected to be dominated by the 7 largest emerging markets in 2050. The next slide that was in this article shows that China is set to become high income by 2027. This comes from a Morgan Stanley 118-page report titled "Why We Are Bullish on China." The investment bank sees a number of dramatic changes over the coming years, the most significant being China's transition from a middle-income nation to a prosperous, high-income nation sometime between 2024 and 2027. The high-income threshold is a gross national income of around $12,500 per capita. This would make China one of only 3 countries with populations over 20 million that have managed to accomplish this feat in the past 30 years, the other 2 being South Korea and Poland. And the next slide discussing China, as well as this comes from the article mentioned in the previous statement there, how China can become a high-income economy by 2027. They give 5 key points here. The first one being transition from high investment to high consumption. Number 2, transition from manufacturing to services. Number 3, transition from low value to high value added manufacturing. Number 4, implement meaningful state-owned enterprises reform. Number 5, reduce excess capacity in the economy. The biggest thing for me, when I look at these statements and articles that discuss China and their growing wealth and the rise of their middle and upper class, you look at culturally the value that their culture and that nation places on precious metals, on gold investment. You look at what we discussed last year, and there's several videos on this on the channel here, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the SGE, how China became a much bigger partner in deciding the gold price. So as we see China become a bigger force to be reckoned with on the economy block, and we see competition for precious metals rise, I think we're going to see much more demand come out of China for both gold and silver. Now you look back historically, we've talked about this as well. Historically, China always valued silver. And there was a big silver trade because there was a demand for silver in China. Now you look at the population of China and the increase in their wealth, and you couple that with a demand for gold and silver going into the coming decades, this could create a dramatic shift in price and flow of precious metals. And go figure, at the same time this is occurring, we're seeing the West suffer economically, almost being diminished. We're seeing the economic clout and power of the United States and Europe dwindling. Definitely makes for interesting times. All right, keep stacking. Keep your eye on the stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for all of your contributions. If you wish to join us for a live broadcast, which we're starting to do more often, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Click the little bell next to that so you can receive notifications, and check in every once in a while to see if we are going to do a live broadcast in the evening. Thanks for being part of the Junius Maltby channel. Don't forget to get yourself a Junius Maltby channel coin, as they are now available. They're striking this week and they will be shipping next week. Thanks for being here. Take care.